The Salem witch trials of 1692 were very controversial times.
The hysteria and pressure of the time period led to the trials and their outcome.
During this time, children, who were supposed to be seen and not heard according to the time period, became the sole deciders of what was to come.
The children had the power because they were the only ones speaking out, and the adults were always concerned when children were in pain.
These children, mixed with the hysteria and pressure from the Puritan religion in the time period, came together as the ingredients to create the perfect recipe for this event.
Around 1688, John Putnam, an elder of Salem, invited Samuel Parris from Barbados to come and preach in the village church.
After a year of negotiations, Parris accepted the job as village minister.
His wife Elizabeth, his daughter Betty, who was 6 years old, his niece Abigail Williams, and his Indian slave Tituba, who was from Barbados, accompanied him to Salem.
After the Parris family moved there, Salem began to change.
People of higher class were beginning to develop, but were unwilling to assume positions in the town as leaders, because two families, the Putnams and the Porters, were competing to be the ultimate leaders of the village in order to gain social status.
Due to the lack of establishment and leadership, people felt vulnerable. So in 1692, when Betty Parris became very ill abruptly, the hysteria began.
She ran around and hid under furniture and complained of always being in pain and of fever.
Some people believed that these symptoms were caused by stress, boredom, asthma, and guilt.
However, at the time, people believed her symptoms were caused by witchcraft.
People found it easy to believe in witchcraft during the time period because, in Salem, an Indian war over borders was raging about 70 miles away from the village.
This led people to believe that the devil was close by, sudden and violent death was a part of people's minds. All of the death from the war alluded to the devil's presence.
Along with Betty, other girls were beginning to demonstrate similar unusual behavior.
Among these girls were Betty, Ann Putnam, who was 11, Mercy Lewis, who was 17, and Mary Wolcott.
A doctor was called to examine the girls. He thought it might have branched off a supernatural origin. People easily believed this because they thought it was easier for the devil to target children, because children were believed to be naive.
The number of girls affected continued to grow.
Eventually, the number rose to 7 girls with the addition of Elizabeth Hubbard, Susanna Sheldon, and Mary Warren.
They all complained about the same symptoms Betty possessed.
Due to the fact that people believed the devil was close, the suspected supernatural presence in the girls became an obsession.
When the girls began accusing people of witchcraft, warrants of arrest were then distributed.
Thus beginning the witch hunt of 1692.
The Salem witch trials altered the lives of many Salemites.
For example, spectral evidence based upon dreams and visions, played a huge role during this time.
Many changes during this time period included the addition of spectral evidence in the courts, and children became more vocal.
For this reason, the official of the court, William Stoughton, allowed spectral evidence during the trials.
For the first time, people could accuse others off of the sole fact that a spirit was sent out on them.
This change occurred due to the fact that children were the spokesmen, and this made people more subject to believe them. Due to the fact that spectral evidence was allowed, children came to have a prominent place in the court.
Also, the court could not prove any hard evidence, and it was forced to accept spectral evidence. The whole town of Salem was affected and took part in the change. All of the people were concerned in this matter.
This entire event caused a huge reaction due to all the hysteria during this time period.
Hysteria was a big factor in the reactions by the people. People accused others in order to take the spotlight off of them.
The supporters of the trials were the accusers. They accused people in order to keep the frenzy continuing.
The opposed both accepted and fought against the trials.
Due to the Puritan religion, if a victim was accused of witchcraft, he or she were sentenced to death.
But if a victim agreed to being in association with witchcraft, then one would be spared his or her life.
Therefore, certain people accepted the accusations of witchery in order to stay alive with their families.
However, other people believed that the trials were an abomination, and they denied all charges.
Therefore, even though they denied the accusations of the girls, they were still sentenced to death.
On the other hand, if a person were to not give a verdict, they would be held in contempt of the court, and they would be executed for this action by being crushed by stone.
Witches were executed in different ways. Some examples included hangings and burnings.
Eventually, the accusations ended and witches disappeared. But witch hunting was seen again in America.
So in order to move forward and not repeat these mistakes, America must learn its lesson.
This event in history will be remembered forever, but people can only hope that it will not happen again.